The sword is a fascinating instrument, whether used as a weapon or as a symbol. In its simplicity, it has a multitude of uses, and in its complexity, it has much to offer us by way of symbolism. Our word sword comes from the Old English word swiord, which means to wound or cut, a literal name for the use of it as a weapon. And it is in the Saxon and Anglo-Saxon period that we begin to see the sword develop further as a valued status symbol and indeed an object possessed of its own spiritual identity. King Athelstan the Glorious was fully aware of these attributes, as were his counterparts in Western Europe. An example is an embassy sent by the Duke of Boulogne, who had hoped to win the king's sister's hand in marriage, and included in the many gifts given to King Athelstan by the Duke was the actual sword of the Emperor Constantine. In the medieval period, the sword is fully entwined with those knights in shining armour, wielding it with skill as a symbol of chivalry and following a strict moral code of honour. By the 17th century, with the advancements in gunpowder and the obvious and efficient use of firearms in warfare, the sword is truly reduced or raised, depending which way you look upon it, as a purely symbolic and ceremonial object and an emblem of military honour. Many monarchs, including our own, use the sword in its ceremonial and honourable context when lightly touching the recipient on the shoulders and head as part of the knighting ceremony, demonstrating without parallel the importance, respect and reverence justly applied to this magnificent traditional artefact. The sword, of course, features in the belief systems of many religions. In the Old Testament, flaming swords presented at and blocking the entrance of the Garden of Eden symbolises protection. Buddhists consider the sword as discrimination of thought, as it cuts away ignorance. In Christianity, the sword is ever linked with the cross of Calvary and a powerful symbol of justice tempered by mercy. The Archangel Michael is often depicted holding scales as well as a sword, depicting truth, purity and the justness of Jesus Christ. In Celtic tradition, the sword is associated with the first king, Nuada, and is the most important of the 4 Celtic treasures, the other 3 being the stone, the spear and the cauldron. Like many ancient gods, Nuada is often associated with water, and this is perhaps why we find so many Celtic swords in bodies of water, possibly left as offerings to Nuada. Within Freemasonry, the sword holds great importance, both in a ceremonial and spiritual context. Traditionally, in our Masonic ceremonies, there is an outer guard or tiler, preventing entry into the meeting. He traditionally held a flaming sword, symbolising the dual purpose of barring entry and protecting those inside. Masonic Grand Masters, including myself, always enter our great assemblies in full ceremonial procession, preceded by the Grand Sword Bearer, who holds firmly and aloft the ceremonial sword as a symbol of protection and of power. This is echoed in royal ceremonial processions, such as the investiture of the Prince of Wales, when he is preceded into Carnarvon Castle by the royal sword bearer. You, like King Athelstan, should regard this emblem with equal respect and perhaps consider deeply the philosophical depths that this much revered object encapsulates, and from this discover your own personal meanings of the sword.